7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Meeting has begun.
Good evening, everyone. The August 13th, 2026 meeting of the Brisbane Planning Commission will now come to order. Staff, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Funke,
Here.
Commissioner Lau. Oh, through the chair, is your mic on?
Here.
Thank you, Commissioner Sayasan.
Here.
Commissioner Wozniak.
Here.
And Chair Gooding.
Here. All right. May we have a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes with 5 ayes. Is there any item that any commissioner would like to remove from the consent calendar?
No.
Hearing none. May we have a motion then, please, to adopt the consent calendar?
I move to adopt the consent calendar.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes with 5 ayes. Next is the oral communications section of the meeting, and this is an opportunity for public questions and comments on any items not on the agenda tonight. As you will recall, the public comment on the main item on the agenda was closed at the last meeting. So this is simply an opportunity for anyone to make any comments on anything that's not on the agenda. If anyone wants to do so, please raise their hand here. And if there anybody from home or remotely that raises their hand, please let us know.
We have no online hands raised.
And no one here in the room. Are you raising your hand, Tom? Okay. Moving on then to written communications. We acknowledge receipt of 2 written communications, one from Michelle Salmon dated today regarding the Brisbane Mobility Plan, and one received from Melissa Foley regarding ecological planning and design guidance. And those have been received. And is that all the communication staff?
Correct.
Thank you. All right, moving on to old and new business.
Excuse me, through the chair, I think we're having technical difficulties. Can we take a quick break?
Sure.
Hold on.
We'll pause until you let us know.
Okay, our technical difficulties have been resolved, and I think
Okay, thank you.
we are good to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll be continuing the item that's been on our agenda for the last several meetings regarding the Baylands sub-area. You want me to read the entire agenda item, or can we simply call it the Bayland item?
You could give it a short title. The Baylands Specific Plan and Associated Entitlements seems appropriate to me.
Okay, that sounds good. The Baylands Specific Plan and the associated entitlements and amendments of Brisbane Municipal Code and zoning ordinance. Staff, do you have some reports, please?
We do. Just give us 1 moment, please. And thank you, Chair and Commission. So this evening, we'll keep our presentation pretty brief. We'll do a recap of last meeting on July 23rd. We'll give a brief overview of the topics that the commissioners identified as wanting to frame deliberations tonight. And we'll stop it at that point and welcome any questions from the commission once we have our presentation launched. Great. Okay. So at the last meeting on July 23rd, the commission heard a presentation from staff and consultants on 5 specific topics that they wanted more information on, and ultimately ended up closing the public hearing. And during the deliberative stage, adopted Resolution PC-01-26 regarding the Bayshore Mobility Plan, modified to implement only mitigation measures associated with the project, eliminate any road diet elements, and include recommendations for further study of the feasibility of having a continuous Class 1 path or sidewalk along Bayshore without the road diet elements. Finally, the commission gave staff some direction regarding key topic areas that you all wanted to identify for framing tonight's deliberations, and we'll go over them very briefly. So the first suite of topics identified by the commission addresses how the specific plan approaches infrastructure, mobility, and neighborhood design. So the first topic is related to connectivity. So how the specific plan provides for connections between the Baylands and Central Brisbane and Sierra Point. So staff provided a summary of how the plan approaches those elements in attachment 3 to the report. In summary, the plan prioritizes safe, non-vehicular, so pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, downtown shuttle options that connect the Baylands with Central Brisbane and Sierra Point. The second topic relates to how the specific plan incorporates a variety of amenity uses to serve residential districts. So that's addressed in more detail in attachment 4, which provided some excerpts from the plan and describes how it, what are called active ground floor uses are either permitted or allowed or required in different residential and commercial zones. But basically the plan does allow active ground floor uses throughout the districts west of the Caltrain easement. Generally, the low-density residential districts are the most restrictive as to what uses would be permitted or conditionally permitted as those active ground floor uses. And for the next tranche of topics, these are regarding how the specific plan is consistent with the sustainability framework for the Baylands, as well as Measure JJ, and the general plan's requirement for the project to be energy neutral on an ongoing basis. So the attachment to the staff report and attachment 5 provided an in-depth review of information previously presented at various meetings, but kind of consolidated all of that regarding how the project is consistent with Measure JJ, as well as the sustainability framework overall. So in summary, as we presented previously, the plan advances zero carbon, energy neutral buildings by minimizing energy demand, maximizing on-site renewable generation, and using additional renewable energy to close any remaining gaps. So consistent with Measure JJ and the general plan. Okay, the third suite of topics was regarding post-development monitoring of the closed landfill and remediated operating units. So this is addressed in detail in attachment 6 to the staff report. It essentially prepares a very detailed table that outlines the currently anticipated requirements for ongoing inspection, post-construction remediation monitoring, all per the remedial action plans that are already approved by the state regulatory agencies and other documents that are under consideration by those regulatory agencies. We do want to note that frequencies for testing have not yet been established, determined, or accepted by the regulatory agencies. Still under review. The table's anticipated frequencies are based on what regulatory agencies currently require and what technical experts anticipate may be required based on their experience with other sites. And upon regulatory agency approval of those documents discussing sampling and monitoring requirements, the documents will be made public, just like the RAPs were, for review. Okay, the last topic that the commission had identified was a little more focused discussion of specific uses that commissioners wanted to discuss. So specifically the by right versus conditionally permitted thresholds for lab uses related to biosafety levels. The plan proposes allowing lab uses up to biosafety level 3 by right and a CUP required for BSL level 4 and up, which is consistent with Sierra Point's regulations for the same. And then commissioners also were interested in discussing whether updates to the dark sky ordinance were warranted to ensure that the ordinance and the plan are properly cross-referenced. So we won't go too deep into detail, but of course we do have consultants available and staff to go through any questions that you might have had on the information we attached to the staff report. The applicant's also here if you need any clarifying information from the applicant based on information that they've presented previously. And we'll put up here again a reminder of what staff is recommending for the commission to act upon. This is unchanged except for the last item regarding the Bayshore Mobility Plan, which was already addressed at the last meeting. So we'll end it here. Go ahead. And welcome any questions from commission.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try to proceed with some sort of a organizational pattern here. I think the best thing to do, is to begin by asking my fellow commissioners if they have any specific questions about the presentation that was just given. I anticipate that we'll be doing deliberation on probably some of the various segments of the specific plan, and we can always ask more flesh out questions then. But if you have a question now that you think was not addressed in the presentation that's important before you begin to deliberate, we can sort of go down the row and see if there's any of those.
No questions.
Alex? And Rule? Okay, thank you. I have a couple. The first is about the sustainability and the energy neutral issue, which is dealt with in attachment 5. And really, some clarification, I think just factually. As I understand it, the specific plan will require in the implementation section that they comply with certain different aspects of how they create energy and how they store it and so forth. And several times in the materials and in the plan, it talks about using off-site renewable energy to fill the gap between energy produced on-site and energy that may be stored in local batteries. Can you just flesh out what that looks like, what off-site renewable energy actually is? That's currently available or anticipated to be available?
Yeah, so one of the, I think, significant changes that happened since the 2015 sustainability framework was adopted, and even since Measure JJ was adopted, is that there have been significant investment and upgrades to the ability for utility providers such as PG&E to source and provide sustainable energy. So at this point, one of the products that is available would be an energy that's supplied from 100% renewable sources. So even though the projections show on the very conservative side in the EIR that there would be a gap between the amount of energy generated on site and some more refined projections that were attached in the memo that show a much smaller gap, it is still anticipated that there would be some off-site energy demand for buildings within the project. However, they would be required to purchase renewable energy from PG&E or a community energy provider so that any electricity use in buildings was carbon neutral and from a renewable source.
Okay. And I think I had asked, I don't know how many meetings ago, it might have been the most recent one, but about the battery issue. And I had noted that the large battery farm, I guess, for lack of a better word, in the southeast eastern portion of the project is not anticipated to come online, if at all, for, at least 10 years or so. And I asked whether or not it was feasible to make that battery farm in some way a requirement of the plan, and if so, what will be the mechanism for that? Does anybody have any, can anybody help me with that one?
Yeah, and I think part of what we've talked about first is it might be a question where the development team can speak to any potential timeline for the delivery of that. You're correct, where it's shown in the land use plan would be on the east side, which is phase 2, broadly speaking. But there could be opportunities, probably more in the development agreement than the specific plan, to talk about the connection between phasing and particular pieces of infrastructure that the city is interested in prioritizing. Though, as I said before, if the chair wishes, you could ask the applicant to speak to when that might be feasible to bring online. That might help add more nuance to the conversation as well.
Okay, we might do that, but I want to exhaust my questions to you folks before we do that.
Sure.
Let me frame it a little different way, and that's probably my framing at issue here. Is it fair to say that at this point, the creation of that battery farm is aspirational, is too harsh a word, it is not specifically required as part of the specific plan, as are uses of the rooftop electricity, the renewable resources from PG&E, that those are actually a condition of getting and maintaining their permits. Not so with the battery farm, as I read it. Is there any other way that we could structure things so that it would be?
Yeah, and just to refine that a little bit, so the specific plan doesn't mandate the delivery of any particular use or program. You are correct that if some of the, say they build residential first, those residential buildings then have mandatory elements such as on-site solar and local batteries, but they're not, there's not a mandate in the specific plan to do those first or deliver them within a particular time frame. And the same, I think, rubric applies to the battery in that it is a permitted use. It would be allowed to develop in conjunction with remediation and infrastructure for that area. But you're correct, it's not a mandatory use at a particular point in time.
Does anybody else have any questions about this particular issue?
Are you trying to ask if there's a way then, since it seems to be aspirational, if we can require it? Is that what you're asking?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and the specific plan doesn't require, as I said, any of the uses at a particular time. Though, as we've talked about before, as we develop the phasing plan to be included in the development agreement, if you have recommendations for infrastructure or utility delivery in connection with other uses, that's something that we can consider in the development agreement context.
But does not Measure JJ require the development to be energy neutral by design? So if the commission finds that the specific plan doesn't mesh with that, and that we think that we would want to recommend certain requirements, just like making the battery storage farm, have that be implemented earlier or whatnot. I think that's something, I think Commissioner Gooding, Chair Gooding was suggesting that, is a requirement that we can make or recommendation that we can make.
And
Yeah,
before you answer, let me just
Go ahead.
just to try to wrap it up into one question you can answer instead of a bunch of piecemeal ones. Measure JJ kind of promised energy neutrality. I mean, really, that was a big selling point of it, I think, as I recall. And here we are at the nitty-gritty of creating the specific plan that makes these dreams and wishes come true. And in this document, it appears to still be, well, we'd like that for that to happen, and the developer says they would like to do that, and I keep seeing words like it would be and it would be rather than there will be. And they're real different verbs in terms of what the people will see 10, 15, 20 years from now. I'm struggling with that, and I don't know if anybody else is as well, because that is probably one of the 2 or 3 biggest selling points of this entire project to the community, and frankly, as a beacon and a role model for other projects everywhere else around. I mean, this could be either a really good role model or, a failed aspiration. And that's more soapbox than it is policy, but so let me ask the question more intelligibly. What mechanisms would this commission have to recommend to the council that would increase the likelihood of, as a specific item, this battery park to get built? I mean, is there some sort of permitting withholding or anything like that would make sure the battery farm gets built?
Yeah, and so those are mechanisms. Certainly, you could recommend that a certain amount of program be developed, and then after that point, it could not continue until other milestones were met, including the battery farm, and then, yeah, that can be part of your recommendation.
I'm trying to bring up to my mind's eye the timetable. My imperfect memory says that the battery farm is one of the very last things to get built. And so I'm worried that there would be no more stick to be wielded once you get to the point where the battery farm is not looking like it's going to get built. And I'd love to be wrong about that, but that's my recollection of the timeline. And I don't know what to do about that.
Oh, sorry. Good. I would just, through the chair, just reiterate what Council Phillips was saying about, the applicant is here and can provide some clarifying information if that's helpful in terms of what their anticipated delivery would be. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, well, then let's do that then. Any objection to hearing from the applicant about this? Would the applicant like to address this issue?
Good evening, Honorable Commissioners, Chair Gooding, Stephanie Shakovsky, representing the Baylands Development Inc. On the energy neutrality, we do have a plan, 55-acre solar farm, solar on all of the houses, solar on all the parking canopies that we estimate right now, given current kind of the generation of the current level of panels that are out there, production, that's somewhere between 55 to 57% of the use that the site will need. So we're not 100, but 55 to 75. And then we will require all of our residents and commercial tenants to purchase from Westlight, which does have 100%. And that is the off-site renewable energy that's sort of discussed in the specific plan. So the project will be 100%. Chair Gooding, you are correct in the phasing for the 55-acre farm is a little bit out there because it is on the landfill under a lot of the soil mounds that have been built up out there. And those soil mounds will come down over time, be moved to the rail yard site as the rail yard site gets developed and the landfill gets closed, then the 55-acre solar farm goes in. So that is a little bit out there. However, on the battery storage facility, we are under contract with a battery storage operator as we speak, who has permits from the state grid, and they are in line to store and release energy to the Martin substation. And they need to be operating by 2030. So they need to be under construction by 2028. So that is very much a live and real deal, and that's 250 megawatts of battery storage.
Where does the energy that goes into the batteries come from? Does it come from the solar farm? Where is it generated?
We will feed it from our solar, but it will mostly be coming from the Martin substation. So right now, the California grid is dropping a lot of renewables during the day because they don't need them. And so battery storage is the only way that they can, make sure that they can store. So during the day, make sure they grab that energy that's being renewed during the day. That's the only time you get renewables from solar and wind is during the day. So when they have excess now, there's almost zero battery storage happening right now around the Martin substation. With this project, then any renewables that the grid doesn't use immediately get stored on the battery and then released at night back to the grid.
Okay. that
There's a
makes
little, discussion of that concept that was just being discussed in attachment 5 to your staff report, which talks about how the introduction of the battery would improve the ability to utilize renewable energy for all the reasons that was just explained, because it would, even if it's pulling from the grid, because of the requirement to purchase all renewable energy, it would be storing carbon-free, renewably produced energy, and then putting that back out when demand was higher and production was lower from on-site sources. So even though it wouldn't generate power itself, it would increase the efficiency and use of renewable energy throughout the area.
We can argue about semantics. I think it's generation because you're recycling. You're picking up energy that the grid is going to drop on the ground because it has no use for it during the day. So the storage will actually, the battery storage will store that and then release it at night. So
I think
some people argue that's not generation, but yeah.
I'm not going to quibble about that, but so now I'm confused factually. How does this differ from the big battery farm that's in the specific plan to be built 10 plus years from now?
No, I think what's 10 plus years from now is the solar field, the solar panel field. That's where we need to have the soil mounds come down. The battery storage facility is up further north, on the landfill side, on the east side of the Baylands. But yeah, it's in a place where it can start construction soon.
That helps me a lot, thank you. And
Yeah.
will, this, two different verbs again, but is the notion that the solar field would fill up that same battery farm that the unused Martin stuff would?
Yes, I believe that. I don't know if that's fully flushed out yet. We can certainly connect directly to that larger battery storage, but we may also have our own smaller storage facility just for the Baylands. That's still being worked out. But in terms of the large battery storage facility that is in the planning stages right now and has received its permits from the state grid, that will be hopefully up and running by 2030.
So it's really the solar farm that is the latest arrival.
Later.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's further south on the landfill. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, I have a related question. During our hearings, some folks and groups came up and spoke about since the Baylands fails to generate 100% of its energy on site, some have suggested if the developer would consider, providing whatever shortfall there is, off-site community scale renewable energy. I I'm not sure what that would look like, but elsewhere within Brisbane, maybe having car charging stations being built or things of that nature. Is that something the developer would consider?
I don't think so, yeah. I mean, we're maxing out what we can, in terms of the solar farm, or what we can do on our property. And then we are requiring all of our, to make up the rest of it, requiring all of our tenants to purchase from the Westlight, which is Brisbane's community aggregator. And that's how we get to 100% renewable for the Baylands. I think to ask for more offsite is, I don't think it's necessary. I think what we've put together is a really good plan. And I think it works. And I think we meet not only the spirit, but I think we meet the letter of the law under Measure JJ.
Just to follow up on that, Westlight is a local solar?
Sorry, yes, no. What Westlight is your community aggregator. They used to be called PCE, Peninsula Clean Energy. Are you familiar with this? It should be on your electric bill if you haven't opted out, Commissioner. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I want to try to ask a few other questions before we start deliberating, because it might help us to do that. One of the questions I'd had, I think at the previous meeting, was regarding monitoring and reporting, and to get some sort of legal guidance as to whether or not the city has the power or the ability to require separate or stricter testing and monitoring than that required by DTSC and the Water Board. And I think, Eric, you were prepared to address that issue.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So a couple of thoughts about that. So we did look into it following your question at the last hearing and didn't identify a specific preemption or so much regulation from those two agencies to say that they've fully occupied the field. However, there may be some other legal reasons that you don't wish to require additional testing beyond what the oversight agencies with specific jurisdictional authority would be requiring. First is that it is a little bit outside of the city's core area of expertise, that the regulatory bodies, the Water Board, DTSC, have the specific expertise to identify the appropriate requirements, and the city's not as well equipped, frankly, to come up with what those standards should be. The other reason is that if the city currently, under the regulatory system, the property owner, any particular management agency, they're the entities that have liability for complying with those requirements and making sure that the site is safe for the permitted uses. The city, if it, assuming it doesn't own the property or otherwise intervene, is outside that chain of liability. However, if the city were to insert itself and start requiring additional testing, higher degrees of testing, it could be viewed as making representations about the status of the property and insert itself into that chain of liability where it otherwise wouldn't have any. So it actually could have the opposite of the intended effect, to increase the city's exposure to risk. What other agencies have done in this situation are to have requirements where reports are provided, say, concurrently to the oversight agencies and the city, have the city have the ability to have some concurrent enforcement rights, for example, ask for certification from DTSC and the Water Board that their requirements were being satisfied, and if not, the city might have then reserve the ability to withhold permits or modify occupancy permits and take other corrective regulatory actions based on the determinations of those oversight agencies with jurisdiction. So if that's, I think that might be both a more common and a more legally conservative way of approaching that type of issue. And it's something that, to the extent it's not already captured in the staff recommended additions in Chapter 9 with the table and the explanation of the monitoring, that's something that the commission could consider providing direction to add some additional concurrent reporting requirements, a repository so the information was easily publicly available, or other safeguards that the commission felt comfortable with.
I'd like to follow up with that. And actually the ongoing testing and monitoring was actually a big concern of mine. And actually what was prepared, this chart and the explanation that you just gave actually alleviates pretty much most of my concerns. So so I do appreciate that. And, you know, and I feel satisfied that that you anticipate that there will be, let me quote here, quarterly cap inspections, quarterly landfill gas and perimeter landfill gas monitoring, semi-annual groundwater, surface water, leachate and seep sampling, and annual settlement monitor. So that's what is the standard that has been done by these agencies, and that's what we can expect, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and you just said that any report that is then submitted to these state agencies, we can automatically, the city can receive those as well, so that the public, anybody who wants to know what's going on, they can have access to that.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
That last piece that Commissioner Sayasan just addressed that is not the proviso that the city be included in the communication chain regarding ongoing testing and monitoring is not currently mandated in the specific plan. Is that correct? Is that?
I don't think it's said quite that expressly, so I think that could be part of, if you want to recommend changes to the plan for council's consideration, that could be part of your motion.
So this would be one of them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions about the testing and monitoring before we move on?
One more question on that aspect. Earlier, I thought I heard a comment about that this is not necessarily approved yet, that this is going still through the process of approval. Is that correct? And when would we know that?
So there are various steps for the regulatory agencies in approving documents that determine how a site will be remediated. So presently, as a reminder, the remedial action plans have been approved by the state agencies for the 2 operating units. And then the landfill closure plan was also approved. So there's additional design level documentation that is presently under preparation and under review by those agencies that gets essentially more detailed. And I would say, if you know, we do have the city's consultants, EKI, on the line. If you want to go to them for more information, the applicant can also speak to where they're at in the process for the next phase of design, remedial design implementation plans with those agencies as well. So whatever your pleasure.
And it's already part of the specific plan that construction permits and use permits are all contingent on the developer complying with whatever gets required by the agencies.
Yes, that's correct.
I'm trying to put it in plain English, but that's
Yeah, yes.
the only, the sort of delta that we would envision recommending to council might be that we require, as part of that same process, including the city in the communication chains and the reporting so that the public would have access to the information.
That's correct. Thank
Among
you.
other reasons, but that would be
Yes.
one. Okay. Thanks for the clarification. Does anybody on this panel have any questions about any issues that were not in the presentation and that we hadn't thought about addressing earlier on? Anything that you thought about more recently that we should bring up while we have all the experts here?
I guess I do have some things that occurred to me since we sent things out. I don't know how you want the deliberation to go. I can just throw out everything I've thought of.
Well, it'd be nice to, if there are some issues that this panel, either the staff or the panel could help address factually, that would be a good time. If it's something about the plan and the issues before us that we want to deliberate about, you can hold them if you want. But it's something that, if there's stuff that we can get help from, just understand better, this would be a great time to ask.
Well, I guess there's one maybe that fits in that category. One of the things that I was thinking about, and it's related to sustainability, is whether or not the plan is in some sense a sort of a living plan. So what I'm thinking of is, for example, as building standards increase, let's say there's an update to the LEED standards, so that, you know, whatever the standards are that we commit to now become sort of less ambitious over time. Is there a mechanism that we kind of audit that and make sure that that the development is current, you know, like every 5 years or something, and say, look, this is what the original standards were, but we can do better now, and we're going to stay in step. And if you could just address that over the course of the whole development. Is there a mechanism to make sure that we kind of audit and make sure that we stay in step with the best available technologies and standards?
Yeah, so I would refer the commission to section 4.2.2 of the specific plan, which deals with the green building certification standards. And it is intended both to apply the then current LEED standards at the time that a development application is submitted, so that it's not stuck at a lower performing metric based on today's technology. And then there's also provisions that explain and give discretion to the city to identify substitute green building standards in place of LEED or Green Point, should those standards be discontinued in the future and a substitute rating system be required. So there are those types of provisions to allow for the standards to evolve and remain current as technology and industry standards continue to improve.
Okay, thank you very much for the reminder there. And that's like, is there a difference between allow and require there?
Could you clarify?
Well, just like I think what I heard was that standards are allowed to be updated.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, that it would require the city to apply the highest standard at the time that the application were submitted. So it allows the city to do that, but it is a requirement.
Yeah.
It is framed as a requirement in the plan.
Okay, great. That's very clear. Thank you.
I might add, if I could, through the chair, that section 4.3 has similar requirements related to whatever the most stringent standards are for building design regarding energy efficiency. So yeah, throughout chapter 4, which is the sustainability chapter, this is the specific plan, that was exactly the intent in staff's recommended changes, was to make it more of a living document recognizing the long-term build out for the project.
And just one more elaboration on the director's comments from that section 4.3. As the building efficiency standards change, that's one of the reasons that we say that the current projections for energy efficiency and energy neutrality are very conservative, because exactly because of those provisions that as the building efficiency standards increase, their energy loads will decrease, and any delta there will become smaller over time.
Also, one more, I think it's a sort of a cleanup question about understanding the your attachment 6, which summarized all the anticipated inspections and monitorings and testings. And just to get down in the weeds here, on page 3 of 3, in the second item about perimeter landfill gas monitoring, in the additional details section, about in the middle of it, it says anticipate quarterly monitoring of the methane monitoring probes, et cetera, et cetera. And the word anticipate appears a handful of times in this document. Is that because the specific plans from the agencies are not yet set in stone and you're making an educated assumption of what the plans will likely require?
Yes, to say the answer shortly, yes, that is why the words anticipate are used as we address in the presentation. I'm not sure if EKI, we have John Montgomery Brown of EKI on, and if he would like to add any more detail, he can address us. Thank you, John.
Hi. I don't have a whole lot of additional detail, but the future monitoring system for the landfill is still really in development. They have the plans there. Basically, they're going to take off all the existing soil. They're going to install a new landfill gas extraction system, new monitoring wells, new perimeter monitoring wells, and things like that. And so the exact, all of that stuff really has to be developed still in consultation with the regulatory agencies and approved by them. And during that process is when the specific monitoring requirements for things like quarterly cap inspections and landfill gas and perimeter landfill gas monitoring will be developed in consultation with the regulatory agencies. Initially when they're designing the system, they may choose something like the quarterly monitoring, which is what is currently being implemented per the waste discharge requirements for the existing landfill. But over time, as the system, in 10 or 15, 20 years, that frequency may be reduced as they've accumulated a bunch of data that demonstrate that, the landfill gases are not escaping the waste prism and things like that.
Thank you. That answer. Any other questions of this gentleman?
No, not at this. No.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you, John.
Darius, did you have some other questions?
I did, yeah. Maybe around the word anticipate also. I was thinking about the connection plan attachment number 3 there. I'm just curious whether, specifically at the Bay Trail, it says that the Baylands project is anticipated to contribute to the fair share of completing these connections. I'm wondering if that's sort of mandated as well, or is that also where that maybe stands around the connectivity portion?
Sure, thank you. I'm not sure if we have John Holmes of Fair and Peers available to address the commission on that topic. John, are you on? Oh, thank you so much.
You're on mute, John.
And if we're unable to get him, we can take a shot at answering it on staff side.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Hello, we can hear you. Yes.
I am here. As staff knows, I'm filling in for Matt Goyne, who usually attends these meetings. And I think this is a topic that he'd be better suited to address, so I might.
Okay.
toss it
Thank
back
you.
to staff.
Thank you. Yeah, so staff would say that the word anticipated regarding how the Baylands would contribute to the fair share toward completing those connections refers to the fact that the city is separately studying adopting a impact fee for transportation related improvements, which would, for any development that it would apply to require a fair share payment for improvements of that kind.
So there's a separate enforcement mechanism for that aspect of the project.
Yeah, separate in that it would be a fee that the city's considering adopting for any project that could impact circulation improvements of that kind.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions that came up in the back of our minds in the past couple of weeks? No? Okay. Thank you very much, staff and all the consultants. Appreciate it. Okay, I think we move on to the actual deliberation segment. As you know, folks, we did close the public hearing last week, so we're going to go directly from the staff presentation to the council deliberate, or excuse me, the commission deliberations. I think what makes the most sense is to deliberate and share our ideas on the specific plan itself and any changes or recommendations or suggestions that we want to make to City Council about that. I think, and if I'm missing something, staff, please correct me, but I think the amendments of the general plan and the circulation elements to comply with government code, et cetera, are, I think they flow from any changes to the specific plan that we suggest or recommend. And I don't think that, I think we can approve or recommend council approval of the amendment items as they will flow from any changes they make to the specific plan, I think. Does that make sense?
Yes, so if you do decide to make a recommendation regarding the specific plan, you can also make a recommendation to, for council to adopt the general plan amendments and zoning changes, and then direct staff to make any conforming edits needed for consistency with the plan recommendations that you recommend.
That's way better put than what I did. Thank you.
We're a good team.
All right. Let's do that then. Anybody have any specific place they want to start off with a specific plan and talk about? And again, folks, what we're here to do is to make recommendations and suggestions to City Council. We don't make any policy here. Our job here is to come up with things for them to think about or suggest that they consider changing. Anybody?
Let's start off with what we were just talking about the testing and monitoring, and that we just add the one requirement that any of those reports of the testing, monitoring, and any further remediation that has to happen, all those reports are automatically transferred to the city and put in a repository so that the public can have easy access to it. Do we all agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Or should we, do you have any more comments on that, or shall we vote on that?
Perhaps that we might want to include in any recommending language that would be with the aim of making that information as available to the public as feasible by website or access to
Yeah, I would assume, I mean, we have, in the city, we have a Brisbane Baylands site, right? So it would just fall under a tab, testing, monitoring, whatever, so that folks can easily click on it and access information.
So, again, another process question, because I get hung up on that. Is there some way something we could suggest as part of our recommendation that the council could use as an enforcement of that provision? That it'd be a condition of permitting or a condition of the development agreement or what? What would it sound like?
Yeah, so I think that you could have it be that exactly as you were just suggesting, the traditional levers are in your permitting and your inspections. So you could have it say that that all reporting had to be shared and current at the time of any permit issuance, so that if they hadn't been concurrently sharing their reports, you would withhold permits until you were given that information and able to share it with the public. And then the same could be true at the occupancy level. So after they've built, but when they're ready to come from their certificate of occupancy, you can make sure that they're current on sharing all of their reporting and make that publicly available.
And once they've gotten their permit, and once they've occupied, and then they stop complying, what then?
Yeah, so there's other, you could impose it, I suppose, and then some jurisdictions will treat that like a code enforcement complaint or define it as a nuisance or an infraction. So failure to report could be something like that, where there was another, oversight mechanism post occupancy.
Could it be a condition of the permit, so that failure to do so would be a violation of the permit and subject to revocation, or some kind of proceeding?
To the extent that there are permits, not all of the uses would be conditionally permitted uses. So you might not have another touch point. It probably is better to have the framework for that expressed at the plan level.
I didn't quite catch the last part.
Oh, better to include that concept at the plan level, to the extent that individual projects that aren't conditionally permitted, you might not have the opportunity to impose that.
So it could still be framed as a code violation,
Correct.
since the plan is part of the code.
Yeah, exactly. So then it would be
Got it.
a code enforcement obligation.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Any other opinions about this particular issue? Do we have, I'll ask for a motion in a second, but do we have consensus about this issue? Okay. And staff, here we get to the nitty-gritty. My inclination, if it's feasible and sensible, is to proceed with these deliberations and make sort of incremental motions about recommendations in the specific plan. And then at the end of the evening, theoretically, we'll have, some height of stack of those. Does that work?
I don't know that the board or the commission, needs to make specific motions for each of those. If you have consensus, then when you make your motion for recommendation, the recommendation could include those consensus recommendation items. So I think it's a similar concept, but you don't necessarily need a formal motion to capture each of the concepts.
So we'll have to keep track of those as we go, rather than.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll all work on it together and make sure that we haven't missed any by the end.
Yeah, somebody please backstop me on this one. Okay. Thank you. Regarding the energy neutrality issue, which brings up the solar panel and the battery park issue and so forth. Any comments or ideas or opinions about how we deal with that? Since we're deliberating, so just thoughts.
I do. I think on a slightly related, like one of the things that came up in the public comment that resonated a lot with me was the sustainability part of it. And I understand that a lot of what's in the plan is basically about making sure you're compliant, and it's a little bit aspirational. And I'm satisfied that it's all, very sincere and, likely to be effective. But I think in response to some of the public comment, I wonder if there could be a mechanism of sort of like an audit every few years, every 5 years or something, where an independent consultant looks at how the project is going and gives some sort of assessment of how the project is doing relative to its stated goals, and whether they're on track. Now, I don't know exactly what this would look like, but it's just sort of an audit mechanism to keep people honest and accountable to varying degrees. You could do it a couple of different ways. You could just publish a report, and you could, you know, and it has no teeth. Or the city could contract someone to do an audit like that, and if it looks like the development is going to fall short, there could be some sort of corrective action. So it's just a suggestion. I think it's obviously kind of a, you know, an undertaking, but I think that would be one way that we could be responsive to some of the feedback we received.
So staff, is there currently in the sustainability or the energy neutrality area of the plan any such requirement to report or produce data? I don't recall any.
Yeah, no, that's correct. So they have to comply with the standards that are expressed in the plan, but there's not currently an audit mechanism to track energy use or GHG emissions incorporated.
Right, from that specific standpoint, the actual emissions and usage. But the design itself, those requirements are,
Yeah, and I completely understand.
Yeah.
We've heard several times that you can't actually measure greenhouse gas emissions, but I think there are probably mechanisms to evaluate a development.
Yeah, and thank you for making that distinction. I didn't mean to include the emissions issue, but really more just the energy consumptions and the sources of the energy being consumed is what we're encouraging by the sustainability framework. And I think Rule's point is maybe well taken. Any other ideas about that issue or thoughts?
Well, I mean, I am concerned that, you know, when I think this development was first envisioned, it was hailed as this shining example of a development that would completely provide its own energy locally on site. And I feel like that's moved away from that goal. And I feel as though I think certain accommodations need to be made to be true to that promise. And it's in Measure JJ, you know, it's supposed to be energy neutral by design, and the design is not energy neutral. So, you know, like I addressed with Stephanie, that, you know, some of the people who have spoken have suggested, you know, if you can't make the development on its own energy neutral, then provide the renewable energies elsewhere in Brisbane, you know.
So maybe I'm about to get semantic, but I suspect that the response might be something along the lines of energy neutrality is not exactly identical to energy self-sufficient. If they're using, you know, off-site renewables to fill the gap between what they produce on-site and what they need at certain periods of time, and that's not a totally absurd response. It's what does energy neutrality mean? Is it the same as we produce every single watt of energy that we need versus buying it from the solar farm next door or the wind farm down the peninsula? I don't know. I mean, I'm just making the devil's argument, if you will. No offense. But I think that's the nuance of the issue.
Yeah, and I think the other nuance, I'm sorry to interrupt there, was just the idea that if you are storing renewable energy, like, you know, you're taking it from the substation and preventing it from being dumped, that's a pretty good trade-off, I think. It's not exactly like being energy self-sufficient, but to the chair's point, it definitely, at least in a regional sense, makes us more energy self-sufficient in a sense, you know. So I guess I'm not as hung up on the self-sufficiency part of it, but, you know, and I agree it is in some ways a little bit semantic.
So what do any of the rest of us think about Commissioner Funka's suggestion about asking for some degree of reporting, data reporting about the extent of.
I think if you're going to do an audit, it has to have teeth. And if you're not going to attach some type of punishment, penalty, if certain goals are not met, then I don't see much value in it. You know, I think a lot of it's about enforcement.
Yeah, I agree. So I think the audit is, I think I left it open like what the teeth would be. But I agree, if you're going to do it, there should be some teeth, but how big they are, I think is, that's something that would have to be discussed. So I think that would be, I know this would be in the nature of like a recommendation to the city council. It's like, hey, we think some sort of audit mechanism with some teeth would be valuable, And I don't know that we can or should get more specific than that, but like I said, I think that's something we heard quite often.
I would be in favor of something like that as well. I think a big promise of JJ was the sort of energy neutrality. So I think having the audit and accountability there would be important.
Cheryl?
No, I agree. I mean, with the accountability. But yes, there has to be some punishment or something has to occur if progress isn't being made as planned.
Does anybody have a vision of what this audit process looks like? Or do we leave that for the wisdom of the council?
Yes, to the council's wisdom.
Okay. Do we, any other segments of the specific plan that we want to talk about? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I had one item that kind of still sticking with me here. It's the biosafety levels, that by right there would be a biosafety level up to 3. I understand that we want to keep it kind of consistent with Sierra Point, but that is not as residential, if you will. And so I think I have concerns around allowing outright up to BSL 3. I think I'd feel more comfortable with BSL 2 and then 3 by permit, but that was something that that keeps getting stuck in my mind.
Staff, maybe you can help us with some factual stuff here. I'm not in any way expert on these distinctions. Can you give us maybe some real life examples of 2 versus 3?
In complete fairness, I would have to pull up the code. I wonder if your fellow commissioner, Wozniak, may provide some basic information and then we can supplement.
Yeah, I think at a top level, BSL 3 would be anything that could be airborne and also contagious and impactful to humans, and like COVID or SARS, those kinds of diseases, and research on that. BSL 2 and below would be not as harmful. And so I think that's sort of the main distinction. And so I have concerns that, we have residencies very close in proximity to where research like that is by right, sort of. And I'm not sure how many BSL 3 facilities we even have in Brisbane in general. I think there aren't very many.
There aren't.
Yeah, I would support that. I don't think it's burdensome to have them come before us if they want, to have that kind of facility.
Can you remind us, what is currently like at Sierra Point? I think you'd mentioned it earlier, BSL 3 is by right, is that right?
That's right. So in the SPCRO district, a conditional use permit is not triggered until you go above BSL level 3.
Are there any residential uses in that zoning space?
No, that just applies to Sierra Point, which is only zoned for non-residential use and is physically separated via the highway. And
I take it that's your reason for making the distinction.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, so the separation by space and sort of distance there would be, yeah.
So your suggestion for recommendation to the board is to consider,
Limiting to BSL 2 and then above would require additional permitting.
so DSL to DSL?
BSL, biosafety level 2 would
Thank
be
you.
allowed up to 2, and then 3 would require additional sort of review potentially. That's what I'd suggest.
The verbiage would require a conditional use permit. So,
Sure, so I would suggest that Chapter 3, Table 3.41 be amended to modify the permitted uses requirements to state that any biosafety level above level 2 requiring a CUP. So just replacing 3 with 2.
if we allude to that in our session-ending motion, you can fill in the gaps on that one?
I'm considering that an item you've reached consensus on, yes.
Thank you. All right, as to the biological issues, any other comments besides that one, or thoughts? Do we have consensus on that one before, so we can do a motion at the end for that?
I'm inclined to agree. It seems like we're pretty much headed there. At the back of my mind, I am sort of curious, what sort of by right thing would the sort of people who build these labs, what are they used to? And will this make it how much more burdensome would it make? So that's at the back of my mind. I'm inclined to agree. In general, it's yeah, you want things to be safe. Let's make more and more stuff conditional. But I'm kind of wondering, how is this done in other places? And you could look at it more closely. But like I said, if I was going to be asked to vote on it right now, I would vote with the rest of the council because it does seem reasonable on the face of it, or the commission rather.
Any other opinions or thoughts about any of the biological issues besides this one? Hearing none. We should probably at least talk about whether there are any thoughts about the circulation element of the specific plan. Any ideas, thoughts, issues, concerns?
So one thing I did, I think the connectivity with central Brisbane, we heard a little bit about that too, and especially if we're going to keep Bayshore, if we're not going to put Bayshore on a diet. I think the connectivity could suffer. I don't think it's pedestrian friendly. I don't think people are going to walk along Bayshore to connect. And I don't know what the vision is for ensuring that connectivity. And to me, there's a bit of a balance between the connectivity between the Baylands and central Brisbane. I think the commercial districts in both places would benefit if it was really robust. And I was wondering about potentially things like a circulator, like the Treasure Island Loop, just something, this is all in the future. So autonomous electric shuttles that just take people there whenever they want to. I was even thinking of potential flyovers that it really is not a burden to hop on your bike and go from one place to the other. It's there's no, how about, for example, and then I'll stop. Kids want to play soccer. They're going to go from Lipman to the fields in the Baylands. Are their parents going to feel comfortable with them, with 12, 11, 10-year-olds crossing Bayshore on their own? So I think it would be great if they would and say, sure, no problem. There's a shuttle, there's a fly over, there's just something that really integrates the two.
I was thinking about that too, and they do propose, a shuttle system, but it's more limited. And if what you're suggesting is to expand the hours of operation for the shuttle system, that's something we could propose. Staff, do you have handy again about the time? I know it's limited by weekdays and weekends and mainly business hours, correct?
The proposed shuttle
Yes.
routes?
Yes.
I do actually have that table in front of me.
And maybe the frequency of those shuttles as well, if that's sort of.
Yeah, we could, I could share my screen if I was in the Zoom, but I'm not. But yeah, so chapter 6, table 6.5.1 lists the proposed Baylands shuttle routes. So for phase one, which would connect with downtown Brisbane, weekday service would be 6 to 9 a.m. and then 4 to 6 p.m. with 1 hour headways, no weekend service. Phase one internal shuttle would operate within the development from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. with 15-minute headways, and on weekends 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., which would be on-demand service. And then it could expand to fixed route if warranted based on how build-out goes. Phase two on the east side would be weekday service 6 to 9 a.m. and then 4 to 6 p.m. with 1 hour headways, and then weekends 10 to 5, again, on demand with the potential to expand to fixed route if warranted. And if the applicant has anything to add on shuttle connectivity, of course, they're here and available to clarify information.
Hi, Chair Gooding, Commissioners. I haven't had the opportunity to speak with you yet. I'm Katie Loic-Sunday, Director of Community Relations for the Baylands. I'm glad you brought this up. Connectivity is a really important topic for us. And yes, you are correct. We do have planned shuttle routes going both within the Baylands and connecting to surrounding transit nodes as well as to central Brisbane. We also have comprehensive bike paths that are running both within the development and beyond. And there is a really interesting pathway if you did want to avoid Bayshore. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the old Bayshore Tunnel. If you've been on the Crocker Amazon Recreational Trail right now that goes around the commercial district there, right now it's a loop and there's a little pathway that sort of veers off of it, and there's an old train tunnel that was built long time ago, and that is intended to connect to a trail that will go onto our property, that will go up around Ice House Hill, and will actually connect directly to the community fields. And one of the shuttle stops, I don't remember off the top of my head if it's phase one or phase two, is actually in that Crocker industrial park. So you could take the shuttle over there with your bike, you could then bike or walk along that trail through the tunnel, and then the community fields is right now planned to be right there.
Yeah, super. That totally satisfies me. I'd send my kid to play soccer and go through the tunnel. Now, are you going to keep the graffiti in the tunnel? Because that's the...
That's a great question. It could be a public art discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, different committee. Thank you very much. So we punt that last one.
Yeah.
So you don't want to make any changes to the shuttle
No,
hours?
I think that I would like to keep that open, but that seems very specific to me. But yes, I
Okay.
think as we, I don't know if we should or need to make a specific recommendation, but I think as much connectivity as possible. And I think this physical connection that is safe under Bayshore is just great, and to me that's
Yeah,
the
for me-
essential part. Yeah.
For me, when I was thinking about the shuttle system, I was thinking about, the elderly and people who are more challenged, and not, as mobile, that if you had expanded hours, folks can go there, grocery shopping, have dinner, come back in time, because right now I think it ends, when you're done with dinner. So you can take the shuttle there, but then you can't really take it back.
Yeah, you got to spend the night.
Yeah, so expanded hours, I think would be helpful to connect the city more, and it would reduce driving, so,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'd also be in favor. It seems like right now there's not a lunchtime shuttle either, if I was hearing that correctly, the timing, right? It was sort of in the morning, so maybe having additional shuttles throughout that time would be great to connect to central Brisbane.
So the inclination of the commission is to suggest to the council to consider expanding the shuttle schedules. Okay. I have a question. Do we have any circulation people here tonight with us? I have a question about bike lanes, whoever that would be. Is there...
We do. We have John Holmes from Fair and Piers online.
Okay.
As he noted, Matt Goyne is not able to attend tonight, but yes, between staff and John, we can do our best. So let us know what you'd like to talk about.
So my question, and I should have done my homework first, and I apologize I didn't. I don't remember right now off the top of my head how much, or if we have any proposed bike lane areas in the specific plan in the circulation section that are proposed to be two-way. That is, one space that is divided into two opposing lanes of bicycle traffic or multimodal traffic. If we don't, then I'll stop talking about this, but if we do, then I have some questions.
Sure. I will, I guess, ask John if he's on, if he has any immediate response to that. Otherwise, I'm happy to look into that and we can update you later in the meeting. So, John, are you able to answer that now, or would we like to get back to the commissioners later in the
Yes,
meeting?
I believe that you'd be referring to what's classified as a class 4 bicycle lane, which are like cycle tracks, which I do believe are included in some portions of the specific plan.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I'll continue my diatribe. I think the night before our last meeting, or the day before, in New York City on the Verrazano Bridge, they had an accident involving one of these new hyper-fast e-scooters and an e-bike. And they were going in opposite directions, and they collided, and one of the two was killed, and the other was pretty seriously injured. And I raise this point because it's also an increasing problem, as I understand it, in local law enforcement here about the use of these, next generation bikes and scooters that can go awfully fast. Essentially, they're motor vehicles, in my view. And I'm a little concerned about the inclusion of those kinds of bike lanes in this development. It's generally flat terrain, amenable to maxing out the speed of these devices, and I think there are serious accidents waiting to happen. And my suggestion for the commission, and I don't know what, I'm here to say what you all think, is to suggest to the council that they consider restricting the use of that type of lane on a safety basis. But that's my 2 cents. Anybody else?
So you're suggesting sort of separating those out or not having those in the plan?
Yeah, I don't pretend to have the expertise to come up with the solution, but I think it's a potential trouble spot. I don't know if the consultants have any immediate comment or response from sort of industry standards or control mechanisms about that. I'd be happy to hear about it if there is.
Would it be like a restriction to any motorized, versus regular?
That's a possibility, I guess. I mean, I think as a practical matter, that's pretty hard to do in today's world. Everybody seems to have one of these things. and frankly, I wouldn't want to keep, let's say, our elderly population from being able to use an e-bike. It vastly increases how long they can ride bikes to be able to have an e-bike. So that's a tough solution, I think. So any other thoughts? Yay or nay? I mean, am I the only one that's worried about
No,
this?
I'm concerned as you are, but I don't know how we would monitor that if we would impose a restriction like that.
Well, to clarify, what I would suggest recommending to council is to consider whether or not they want to eliminate or somehow modify the circulation, the multimodal part, the bike paths, so that you don't have oncoming traffic occupying essentially one roadway, with just a dotted line down the middle, and ask the traffic folks to come up with a different way or a different place to locate bicycle or scooter traffic so that they aren't in oncoming lanes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I would imagine that there's like a traffic engineering solution to that already. You know what I mean? I would look to Valencia or something and say, well, what are the rules there? I share the concern, obviously, but I don't know if it's something Brisbane specific. I imagine that there is, that everyone shares the concern.
Yeah, and I don't have the map in my mind's eye to be able to parse out where I change what. I just think I believe it would be worth taking a second look at it to see if there are alternatives that would reduce that potential danger. So that would be my suggestion to make to the council to ask for that or to look into that.
And maybe a point of clarification then, so this was a class 4 type bike path, is that what this refers to? And I guess, are there sort of
If I may, through the chair, Miles Brzezicki, Public Works Director. So the Class 1 facilities are the ones that are generally bidirectional. So those are the ones that are shared pathways. The Class 4 is actually a buffered bike lane, and generally they're going to be on each side of the roadway or segment. So the Class 1 facilities are generally the ones that you're going to have with a dividing line, stripe line with two sides. I would point that we do have other existing facilities like the Bay Trail that are shared. So there would be, some where those touch points would interact. I think there's some design that we would need to look into. So we can definitely look into this. But yeah, the Class 1s are the ones that I think from the conversation would be the ones you're concerned about.
Thanks.
I think especially if you would, for example, want to feel good about letting your kids ride between the two, and if they were going to do it along Bayshore, it sure would be reassuring, to your point, if they,
I mean, I think, 20 years ago, I wouldn't be having this concern because everybody had a just regular bike and you went as fast as your little feet could pedal you. These days, you hear all, with some frequency, 14-year-old kids going to school on a vehicle that can go 25, 28 miles an hour. And yikes. If that's in one direction, if they're actually coming at each other, that's a 50-mile-an-hour contact point. So anyway, that's any objections to recommending that, or suggesting it? Okay. I think I tried weeks ago to get people excited about the green shared streets, and I had no success. So I'll move on from that one.
Well, I mean, you mean the green shared as in you have an opposition towards it?
I did, and I've been thinking about, staff and experts' response that it has worked and has been working in other places, and I've become a skeptic instead of a frank opponent of it. But I don't think there's the consensus here.
I express my instinctive concern over safety because I'm, like I said in prior hearings, I'm in San Francisco a lot, and I walk in areas where there's scooters and e-bikes and pets and, parents with children in strollers. And if you're going to have green shared streets where all of them can exist in that same plane, that is concerning for me. I mean, because it scares me to where I avoid places like that because, kids and even older adults will be on those scooters and they'll just zip by you, and you just wince and hope that they're not going to run over a dog or a child or something. So I know we discussed that it's only for, I think, a block or two or whatnot, but it still concerns me. But, I don't know if anybody else shares that.
I'm definitely still a skeptic as well, as you kind of pointed it, but I think if the experts sort of suggested it, I was less concerned, but I'd be open to hearing out how you might envision this.
I mean, I guess the issue is whether or not we raise this as an issue to City Council or not. And
But what would the proposal? We're just raising an issue. What's the proposal to not allow green streets, or not allow certain vehicles on the green street, or certain kinds of modes of transportation, or what's the specific?
I honestly I'm not sure. That's why
Yeah.
I should have just kept quiet about it.
Yeah. No, and I understand. It's similar to the issue about the what's going along on Bayshore. I share the concern, but I also think that by the time we put a green street in the Baylands, it's like people will have thought about it some more. I think, and I assume there will be some engineering solutions to it. It'll be my feeling. I'm not sure that we need to have a specific, like a Brisbane specific preventative measure that is more strict than in Seattle, for example, or San Francisco.
I don't see it as an engineering solution, as a behavioral situation that I don't think you can really control. Because, I mean, when someone is on an e-scooter or an e-bike, I don't think you control how fast they go, even if it says, oh, this area, 5 miles an hour, or, I don't think they're going to pay attention to that.
Well, then that may be an enforcement issue, but so I guess what I would imagine is by that time, there will be like, hey, you're on a green street, there's gonna be kids in strollers, there's gonna be pets, you cannot go faster than 5 or 10 miles an hour. And you probably, if you have an enforcement regime, you change behavior, I think. You should be able to, that's what they're for, right?
Yep, okay. I've said my piece. I can't wait to see dash cam video of a Waymo turning onto a green shared street, confronting pedestrians, scooters, and cars pulling out of driveways. It's gonna be fun to watch. It's gonna be fun to watch. All right. Infrastructure section of the specific plan about drainage and water supply and so forth. Any issues or thoughts anybody has about making any comments to the specific plan? There is, of course, the issue of the water supply. My 2 cents is that that's dealt with by the plan scheme in terms of requiring the source of the water to be established to their satisfaction before the project is allowed to proceed. I think that's a regional problem that probably is best handled regionally rather than with one city's plan. But that's just my 2 cents. Any other thoughts about that?
I thought, staff, did you not say that water issues are not within our jurisdiction to consider?
Well, Measure JJ does require that a reliable water supply be approved before any site development occurs. So it's not something that is currently being considered, and if and when there is a water supply agreement, that is something that council would act on rather than the commission.
All right, moving on from that. Any other infrastructure issues that anybody has? Any concerns about worth raising to council? No. Hearing none. I just want to raise this because it's been the topic of discussions both here and elsewhere in the community about data center language. And I know there is some concern about the existence and allowing of data centers here and everywhere, really. However, I think that is addressed by the specific plan in the following way, that there are in the plan a whole selection of permitted use, allowable uses that are very specific and very clear, and language also in the plan that no other uses will be allowed without going through an entirely separate process of use permitting. Which would then be a community issue to be addressed with, very public and very transparent discussion. But as the specific plan is currently worded, it does not consider a data center among the allowed uses. And I think that, meanwhile, on a different screen, the City Council has a subcommittee that's dealing with this particular issue about data centers. That I think because the plan is so specific about what is allowed and what's not, I don't think we need to duplicate or get in each other's way about. Any other thoughts about that? Okay. was on my long list from last month. I just wanted to say it out loud. Also on my list from last week was the dark sky ordinance issue, but I've gone back over in discussing with staff offline that the specific plan does very specifically not incorporate technically, but acknowledge that the dark sky ordinance is applicable to the uses in the Baylands area. Have I stated that correctly?
Yes, you have. And further, if I could expand on that, the plan also sets out its own site-wide illumination standards and other standards that, again, presently, as we discussed last time in the Municipal Code, Dark Sky Ordinance, it doesn't establish site-wide illumination standards. They are established in the specific plan, along with other more specific standards too.
And the standards in the plan are at least as stringent as those in the dark sky ordinance. Is that fair to say?
Correct. And again, there are also additional standards that don't appear in the ordinance because the ordinance didn't contemplate this specific plan.
Okay, thank you. So we've talked about the energy issue. We've talked about the circulation issue. We've talked about the infrastructure and water issue. And we've talked about the testing and monitoring and reporting issue. Are there any other issues that anybody wants to raise about this plan?
Yes, I brought it up at a couple of our hearings, the issue with San Bruno Mountain Watch and the location of their nursery. Is there any opposition to their request that they remain where they are and not be moved to Ice House Hill and the shooting range that's there? So I think it's a reasonable request, and I think we should make the recommendation that they stay where they are and they be incorporated with the community fields. I think that's where the community, will be, and they can educate folks on the mountain and conservation. So I think it's a good idea to do as they request.
Can anybody on that side of the room remind me about the rationale, if you will, or the sort of the basis for relocating it to where the plan currently envisions? Was there some specific impetus for that? Maybe that's a question for the applicant, I'm not sure.
Yes, you certainly could ask the applicant to clarify, and then we can add it if needed.
The reason for move, as I remember it, it had to do with the fact that it would sort of compete with the fields, just making the playing fields. Competing uses is what I remember mostly.
Yes.
And I'm not opposed. I think we should definitely, it should be given consideration. I don't think it's beyond the bounds of possibility that the developer would potentially, in the future, 5, 10 years, whenever it comes to pass, say, there is this other facility here, and it might actually be made more attractive. I just think that and in which case, San Bruno Mountain Watch might say, you know what, that's fine. But I don't think they should be compelled to move, is my thing. So I definitely want to respect their desire to stay, and I hope the developer will be open to that. And I think you'd previously indicated that you were, like, you'd be open to discussion. But, yeah.
All right, so the suggestion would be to recommend the city council, that they amend the plan to maintain the nursery in its current location. What section of the plan
It's
are we in here for that?
Chapter 2. Well, I'm sure it's mentioned in multiple places, but certainly in Chapter 2, Ice House Hill District, so
Gotcha.
describing the uses in that district. That's in section 2.5.3. And
And
there are,
figure 2.5.4,
Thank you.
just in that same section shows the relocation, but exactly as Vice Chair just explained, that in that section 2.5.3, it explains that the nursery would be relocated to the south side of Ice House Hill, primarily to create space for the recreational fields.
Any other thoughts and opinions about this issue?
Yeah, I just, again, it's just like, I'm not sure it should be compelled to stay there. Like, if the other location for some reason becomes more attractive, and that's fine. I just think, it's about not compelling them to move.
So we would recommend to the council to amend the plan to allow the nursery to remain there unless and until a preferable location can be offered. Is that feasible language?
That sounds reasonable to me, yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll be able to repeat that in a minute. I'm trying to flip through other segments of this plan that might have issues. If anybody else has any,
Yeah, I have another one.
thank you.
So during our hearings, the Sierra Club and various other environmental organizations asked us to consider putting in conservation easements in the specific plan to ensure that the open space that has been provided is more protected in perpetuity, and I don't see any harm in doing that because we're all for, we all think open space is good, and the developer has allocated, I think, about 25% of the Baylands to it. So we all acknowledge it's important. I think, we honor that commitment by ensuring that it is protected forever. We've allocated this open space. Let's make sure it's never taken away. And, the Sierra Club and others seem to think that a conservation easement is the best way to ensure that protection. So I'm inclined to make the recommendation that they're asking us to make to the city council.
I'd be in favor of that as well. And that sounds.
The staff, is there any regulatory or implementation issue that we're missing here that?
Was want to make sure that so table 8.2.1 does identify that all of the habitat preservation and wetlands areas along the creek, Lagoon Park, and Ice House Hill would be subject to a conservation easement in favor of the Department of Fish and Wildlife or another entity approved by the city. So I just want to make sure if we're talking about expanding that to other areas, or make sure that we're clear about what the recommendation is beyond the conservation easement that's already called for in the plan.
Yeah, I think we can refer the city council and attach the June 10th, 26th letter by the Sierra Club and others where they outline their reason and their requests, and I think it covers all open space.
Okay, anybody disagree with that? With that, making that recommendation?
Yep.
Okay. Any others?
Yes. So the Baylands proposes to build up to 2,200 housing units and over 6.5 million square feet of commercial development. So I think what would be helpful to have there is a daycare, like we make a recommendation that the specific plan include a daycare. I don't know where you put, I don't care, but one should be put in there because you're going to have a lot of workers, you're going to have a lot of families, and childcare is really tough to find these days, and affordable childcare. So if we make a recommendation that there be a daycare and make it affordable, whether it be subsidized through some, I don't know, through a development agreement or whatnot. But I think that's something that should be considered.
Yeah, I agree. It was on my list as well. I was
Okay.
wondering when we were going to get to the any other business or any other recommend. That was on my list for sure. I think that childcare is probably the main reason why people drive. You have to drive their kids somewhere, and I think maybe not just even as part of the commercial development part of it, but just even like setting aside. I'm not sure how that would work in the development as a whole, but like childcare, you want people to have a place to take their kids during the day so they don't necessarily have to drive
And
somewhere.
if you look at table 3.4.1, daycare uses are permitted by right in the high-density residential, mid-density residential, and low-density residential districts, and they are conditionally permitted uses in each of the commercial districts. So that is a use that is allowed throughout the specific plan area.
And is that, I wonder what the difference there is between allowed and you shall make a provision for it.
Well, the zoning, the zoning does not force anyone to build anything. Again, but similar to the conversation we were having earlier, there are no mandates to construct any part of the program under the specific plan. The specific plan allows the uses and creates the regulatory framework for how they will develop.
Yeah, so the one thing, sorry, is it all right if I go on? Okay. One thing I've been thinking a little bit about, just the complexion of the place, you know? So I actually walked around a few other developments like this, including Mission Bay. And it's like, well, would I want to live here? What would it be like? And allowing by right development, I'm not sure that it gives me necessarily all the assurance I need that it has the sort of the character that I would like. Because by right means, well, maybe no one wants to build it. And, everyone leaves the Baylands to take their kids to South San Francisco for daycare. So I think that I wonder maybe that should be studied a little bit more, and it should not necessarily only be by right. And while we're at it, under that same sort of topic, which I think falls under the desires that are sort of encoded in JJ, is a community wellness center, something like that. I think there has been a desire for that in Brisbane. And along those same lines, I assume that's also allowed by right, if someone wanted to do that. But I think there is a demand for that, or not a demand, a desire. And I think it would improve connectivity and, make healthier people.
Yeah, and I would see it as, you can look at it as a community benefit. It's something, the developers asking us to make these changes, to zoning, to whatnot, and all these things so that they can build their project. And I don't think it's much to ask that, they want to build all this housing and all this commercial development and bring all these jobs in here. Well, let's do something for the workers and the people who live there. Give them daycare, affordable daycare, not for free, but, affordable. We can't just hope that someone will build a daycare there. I think we can require it. I think the city council can require it as part of approval of the project.
Well, and I guess if you're looking at them as community benefits, the place to capture that would be the development agreement, where the city has the opportunity to negotiate for particular community benefits in connection with, other rights granted to the developer.
Yeah, and I think that's right. So thank you for putting it in those terms. And I think maybe that is something for the development agreement, and that we would recommend that city council or the city talk seriously about daycare and a wellness center.
Yeah, and that, just as a reminder, the development agreement at this point is not on your agenda tonight. It's not before you. You will have the opportunity to review and make a recommendation in connection with that piece before it moves to council as well.
Okay.
So would those recommendations be made along with this, or do we wait on that?
I would suggest saving that for the follow-up conversation we'll have devoted specifically to the development agreement.
Thank you for that. Any others?
Yes, I have one more. So currently, the specific plan allocates land for a potential middle school there, 6th to 8th grade. And, you know, Brisbane already has a middle school. We have an elementary school, but we're missing a high school. So the middle school would, I think, take up about 5 to 7 acres. And if we were to consider a high school there, it would require about 11 acres. So I've lived here for about 20 years. And ever since I've lived here, what comes up now and then will always come up from, you know, folks I talk to in the community is they lament that we don't have a high school. And I feel like the Baylands is a unique opportunity to potentially have that, you know, be a reality. And, you know, I understand that whether or not a high school is built there depends upon the school board and whatnot. But if we don't allocate the land required for a high school, which is about 11 acres, we will have foreclosed that option for any future school board to decide on. So I think, and currently, you know, it's an issue that's ongoing with folks in Brisbane. I don't know if you're aware that there's been a petition circulating from folks for a high school. I think it's up to like 200 signatures. So it's something that the community is very passionate about, and I think it's something that this commission needs to consider because we need to be forward-thinking. And it's not just for the folks that currently live here. I mean, you know, the people that will be living in the Baylands, they don't have a vote in this. They don't have a say. You know, when they move there, you know, I think it would be important to them to have a high school that their children can go to right there in Brisbane rather than sending them to a different city to go to a high school. You know, they're paying their property taxes, but yet they're going to have to, you know, take their kids to a city that's not Brisbane. So, you know, so I think we have to keep their interests in mind as well. And I don't think it harms anything to allocate the additional land for the high school. And if, you know, the school board or whatever decides that one shall not be built, then you can use that extra space for something else. It's not like there's any, I think, harm to allocate the space now.
I guess, is there a reason to not also allocate space for a lower school then, or would Brisbane Elementary be sufficient? Because there's no lower school there as well, currently planned, right? And so if we have like early childcare, we'd be missing sort of that elementary. I don't know if that's something else you'd consider recommending.
Yeah, we could consider that if you think more space is needed. I think for the 11 acres, there's a St. Ignatius School in San Francisco, and they have a high school, but also middle school. So it depends on how you structure, you know, the design. But I think it could accommodate that. But it's just. Go ahead.
The program you're talking about is my alma mater.
Oh.
And it's not really a middle school. It's a summer program for sort of getting kids up to speed to be able to meet the standards of regular admission by giving them a head start, if you will, into the college prep program. But it's not, there's no, to my knowledge, any separate facility that is a middle school there. But my question to this, and I think staff looked like they were about to address the issue in some way, is that this high school issue has been rattling around Brisbane government and politics for decades. And I don't know that we have the data or the experience or expertise to figure out if there's the critical mass to put a high school in Brisbane. And so if we want to suggest it or recommend it, maybe that's feasible, but to sort of allocate space in the plan, it might be difficult to say 5, 6, 7, 10 years from now, when a lot of the other build out has occurred, to say, oh, well, now we have this extra land because Bayshore District decided that they couldn't put a high school there. And now the land, does it lie fallow? Does it suddenly get switched to something else? How does that really work, come the day? I don't know. I'm just throwing up issues that are potentially problematic. But staff, do you have any other information to share about that?
Well, yeah, I guess to echo what you were just saying, would look the EIR figure 417-1 shows the school district boundaries and then has a discussion of the amount of students that are projected to be generated from Baylands at build-out development. There were approximately 345 elementary school students between the two school districts. The far and away the majority of those were in the Bayshore district, and then 128 new middle school students. But the conclusion was, in discussions with both of those districts, that new facilities wouldn't be needed at the elementary level based on the current enrollment projections, and the amount of students generated. With respect to the high school, as you were just saying, Chair, it is maybe a bigger issue. I'd also say in some ways it relates, or it's similar to the daycare and community wellness center. If you are looking at an increased dedication of land, that comes at a cost of development potential for the developer. And I guess we would probably look at that as part of the matrix of community benefits in the DA context, if that's something that the city wants to pursue.
Yeah, it almost seems like if we were to recommend that, we'd be signing the petition. And I think, we're, as the chairman said, I think it has been debated, and I agree with you, the demand is there. It's been a discussion for a long time. I think I've heard on the other side of that argument that the other high schools in the Jefferson School District, our enrollment is kind of, how are you going to impact the viability of the other high schools in the district? And there's the other argument, but this is, I think, a very individual one. Is like, kids go to elementary school here. We have a fantastic elementary school. We have middle school. Maybe it's time to spread their wings when they go to high school. But that, I think, is an individual choice for parents. So that doesn't take away from the fact that there are obviously people who are signing this petition who want high school in Brisbane. So I'm not, I guess I'm just not totally convinced.
Is the, currently it's allocated, 4 or 5 acres for a middle school. Is there some, to be a high school, is there some size limitation? Can that middle school be, can it be changed to a high school instead of a middle school development? Is it written in stone that it has to be a middle school?
Yeah, there are state standards for facility sizes, and then high school. I heard Commissioner throw out the idea of 11 acres. Even that's relatively small for a high school, even in an urban area, and to meet state standards and have facilities, are probably looking at a significantly larger facility.
Because some of these private schools, even in the city, seem like they're well under 4 acres in size, land-wise, and even in the peninsula. So that kind of, for a high school, it just surprises me that there's, a state regulation for that.
So I don't, if we were to do a straw vote on this, my 1 of 5, my 2 cents is that I think this is a decision that's that's better left to the education experts and the school districts negotiating with the cities as to what they, how many students they really will have at what points in time. And I would be reluctant to presume that I have better information about it. That's just one, but.
I respect your thoughts on this, because I remember when I moved here over 20 years ago and this project started, and I was always hoping that, a high school would be included, in the project and the plan, and I was disappointed when, I heard that it wasn't, and my children, they went to school in San Francisco, because they weren't gonna be bused to, pretty far away for them to go to high school, so. It would be, yeah.
I think it's just, leaving the option open. I think by not allocating space, we've foreclosed any discussion, because we don't know what politicians, school board, people will do in the future. But if we don't allocate the space, they won't even have to consider it. I guess I want to give some considerations to the families, the parents that really want this. And unless, this is something that's wholly unfeasible for the developer, that they can't allocate this additional space, I want to keep the option open. And like I said, the land is valuable. If you don't build a high school, I'm sure it could be used for something else.
Yeah, I think optionality is always good. I think I'm with Doug that you keep the option open, but defer the decision to a process that involves the school district, whatever. Are you trying to create a by right for like a private school? Is that an option? Is that what we want? Or would you want it to be a public school? So again, I think I would just say, I don't know enough about it to say that, but keeping the option open for any of those possibilities, I think is reasonable, so.
Yeah, we can just make a simple recommendation to the city council that they consider asking the developer to set aside more land for a potential high school. Not that one will be built, but you got to keep that option open, and because if you don't, then it will never happen. So we've made that decision. If we don't do this, it will just never happen, because there's no other space in the city for one to be built.
Yeah. And what you could even imagine putting a sunset on that or something, and saying, look, if you haven't made the decision in 5 or 10 years, it's back open to whatever. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Well, I think
keep
those,
the
if
option
you're
open
looking at the land dedication and a sunset, those are, I would, again, refer that back to the development agreement. That's, if you're looking for an additional set aside and contribution of land value and a time horizon, again, I think that fits in the same sort of category of public benefit that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, okay.
So
That's
as
totally fair.
as a matter of process, I think you said a few minutes ago that this is an issue for the development agreement, which is where the set-asides and requirements are negotiated. Will this commission have a chance to provide input on that before the development agreement is actually tentatively reached?
Yes, so there will be a form draft development agreement for the commission to consider, make recommendations on before it goes to council, so before the final
Okay, all right.
deal terms are set.
Then my inclination would be to do that at that time, which appears to be procedurally sort of where it belongs.
Okay.
Is that fine? Okay. But thank you for raising the issue. It's a hot one. Any others? No? This is the time. This is my saying anything else?
Yeah, I have one more, but it's more in the form of a question. And I'm curious whether either the applicant or, developer or the city, I'm curious about the idea of an anchor tenant, like Mission Bay had UCSF. I heard that we were in the running for that. I'm sure you've thought about it. I'm just curious what you think about that, or what the city thinks.
Yeah, I think that will totally defer to the applicant team
Okay.
to share any thoughts that they do or don't have at this time.
Yeah, as far as I understand, it was kind of big part of the success of Mission Bay, like having a kind of catalyzed the whole ecosystem around there. So, and it's not a recommendation. I'm just curious what you think, and I'm sure you've thought about it.
It's a great question, and we do get a lot of questions, a lot about the future tenants of the project, but we don't have one envisioned at this time. Really right now, we're trying to figure out what is allowed to go where. And then I think once we get a sense of that, obviously we'll go to market partners and determine who would want to be operating in the space and what, if any, anchor tenant could look like. So we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
Darius, any other issues? Alex? Anything else? Going once, going twice? Give me 1 minute. I don't have any other issues at this time either, so it may be time, I think, for the chair to entertain a motion, and I'm going to try to formulate it. Help me out where you can.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to bother you, and a very important conversation, but I just wondered, it's a public hearing, and it's been, you've been talking for 2 hours, and there hasn't been any public allowed to speak. And I just wondered when you thought that was going to occur.
Thank you for the question, ma'am. I appreciate the question. At the last meeting, the commission heard public comments, as we had for several sessions before that, and the commission voted as a commission to close the public hearing at that time, so that this meeting would consist.
Could you speak a little louder?
Sure. The commission voted to close the public hearing at the last meeting, so that this meeting would consist entirely of the final staff presentations and then deliberations by the commission.
You have closed the public hearing then?
Yes, we
at the
did.
last meeting?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
Could I just verify that with the city attorney?
Yes, the hearing was closed.
Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. All right. Do you want me to try to formulate the motion, or does somebody else have it in mind?
I'll second it, Doug, if you.
All right. My suggested motion, that someone else should initiate, but I'll suggest the framework of it, is that the commission vote or adopt the staff recommended Baylands Specific Plan dated May 2026 in accordance with Government Code Sections 65450 and 65850 as a zoning ordinance, with the following suggestions and recommendations to the City Council to consider as changes or amendments to the specific plan. One would be to require, as part of the monitoring and testing and sampling, that the City of Brisbane be included in the communications regarding that, with a mind that those that data would be as transparent and available to the public as possible. Next, on the energy issue, that we would suggest or recommend that the council consider requiring some kind of audit or reporting by the project developer and subsequent owners of their performance with regard to energy production and consumption, to be able to assess the degree to which it is either self-sustaining or otherwise compliant. With regard to biological issues, that the council consider reducing, well, changing the plan to provide that BSL2 uses would be as of right. Pardon me. The BSL3 uses would require further process by way of conditional use permit or otherwise. Was that the only biological issue? I think it was. On the circulation elements, that the council consider upgrading or improving the existing plans for a shuttle schedule to provide for better connectivity at different times of the day. And secondly, that the council consider modifying the circulation plan to reduce or eliminate situations that I believe are class 1 bicycle or multimodal lanes, but to prevent the situation of one non-motor vehicle roadway being used by bikes and scooters that are traveling in opposite directions. Next, this probably belongs in the land use and planning issue, that the council consider that the nursery be allowed to remain in its current location, but allow for the possibility that if they were offered a location that is more desirable or beneficial for them, that they would have the option of being able to accept that. Next, conservation issues, that we would suggest to council that they review the Sierra Club's June 10th, 2026 letter suggesting a higher degree or extent of conservation easements to better ensure the long-term health of the open space usage. Have I left anything out?
Do we want to, I'm just going to ask you, can you say that again?
No.
No, but the community benefits, I wonder, I know we decided to defer that. That's more appropriate to the, for the development agreement. But I wonder if that should be mentioned as part of the recommendation. That's one. I don't know. Maybe staff can advise on that.
My two suggestions, one would be, I think I heard this at the beginning of your comments, Chair, but the additions and changes that you had were additions to the resolution. Is the motion to adopt the resolution with the council, with the commission's recommendation to council with those additional changes? I just want to make sure I heard that part correctly.
Yes.
Okay, and then there were a set of staff recommended cleanup changes to the specific plan and the enhanced
get to that in a
table.
second.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that
I haven't forgotten that.
that was still on your list.
I just want to make sure that I haven't forgotten any issue-specific items.
And then
Issue specific, the only one I had was that the audit would be probably independent. You know what I mean? So the city might do that, as a, instead of the developer. But anyway, and it's the idea is the audit is the important part.
Okay.
And do you need to repeat about the Bayshore Mobility Plan? Or-
I will separately.
Oh, okay.
well, and the Bayshore plan, you made a motion which passed at the last hearing to make that recommendation. So that action you've already taken.
Okay.
I'll explain that for the public in a minute, because it's.
And then just I got off on a little tangent before I actually answered the vice chair's question, but I don't think that your community benefits comments need to be part of this recommendation because you will have another item specifically to consider those.
Okay.
All right. And I'll get to the making the related amendments to the other pieces of this in a minute. We should probably vote on this motion first and then get to those, I think.
Well, again, I think that it will just be the way that I would recommend doing it. You'd have one motion to adopt the resolution with the recommendations to council with the additions that there were consensus on, plus the staff recommended modifications, should you choose to recommend those as well. But I think that then that can all be done in one vote on that resolution. So then we'll have that record.
Okay. So is the issue-specific items that I mentioned, plus adopting the staff recommended changes from the first specific plan in late 2025 to the one in May 2026.
Well, and there were, so the specific plan, the resolution that's before you has the May 2026 specific plan along with the EIR, the general plan, and the zoning amendments. We have the 7 topic commission-specific additions to the 2026 specific plan. But then at our July 23rd meeting, there were some text cleanup changes and the new table for Chapter 9 that staff had recommended in addition to what's in the May 2026 plan. So
That's right.
if the commission wants to recommend that, we would suggest that that be part of your motion as well.
And that's right. This was one giant resolution.
That's correct.
One big, beautiful resolution.
Exactly.
Okay. So the motion will be to make the recommendations of the 7 items that I previously listed, to adopt the staff recommended specific plan of May 2026, and in addition to that, the changes suggested by staff at the July 23rd, 2026 meeting, and to recognize that the adoption of the resolution will include approving, amending the general plan, land use element, and the circulation element, and Title 17, the zoning element, with whatever changes would be required to reflect the 7 specific items that we already listed.
Yes.
Period.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. The motion passes with 5 ayes. I also want to make sure that the public understands that the Bayshore Mobility Plan that was before the commission at the July 23rd meeting was approved with a significant modification that the commission recommends to the council that the mobility plan be adopted only with regard to the steps necessary to implement the mitigation measures recommended by the EIR, I believe, correct? And that it do not include the road diet, but that the council consider pursuing the possibility or inquiring and discussing with staff and consultants the possibility of extending sidewalk and other services for Bayshore Boulevard south of the limits of the project to the extent it's feasible. We already have that resolution on the record. I'm not trying to restate it. I'm just trying to explain to the public. That's why we're not really on the mobility plan tonight. We already have with those suggestions to council. Any other loose ends? All right. I believe our next scheduled meeting would be August 27th, and the commission stands adjourned until that time.
I'm sorry, but that went really fast. I thought we had another resolution potentially about the community benefits, right? I think that's what I heard.
Oh, sorry, that'll be at a future meeting when we have the development agreement
gotcha.
for you. So that, you are correct that there will be another resolution, but it won't be tonight.
All right.
I sort of blew right past any items initiated by staff. Are there any?
Not this evening.
Okay, thank you. We stand adjourned. Thank you all very, very much for all your comments, all your participation, and all your interest, and all the concern that you have demonstrated for the future of this city. And we all thank you for that help, and let's all move forward. Thank you.